She had the voice of an angel, man smooth, soulful, and classy. But behind that beautiful smile was a woman fighting through storms the world never really saw. Zola Taylor wasn't just another singer. She was the woman in the Platters, holding her own in a group full of men at a time when that was unheard of. From the spotlight of the 1,950 stage to the heartbreak of Hollywood, her story is one of talent, love, and pain all tangled together. She rose with elegance, fell with heartbreak, and left a legacy most people never truly understood. What really happened to Zola Taylor? Let's get into her story right now. Let me know where you're watching this from in the comments. Grab yourself a warm drink, maybe a cup of water or tea, sit back, and let's start this journey together. Zola Taylor came into this world with rhythm in her veins, man. Born in Los Angeles in the early 1930s, she grew up surrounded by the sounds of gospel choirs, street corner harmonies, and that early spark of what would soon become rhythm and blues. Back then, LA wasn't all palm trees and movie stars. For a young black girl, it was tough, opportunities were slim, racism was real, and the idea of a woman leading a stage full of men, unthinkable. But Zola had something you couldn't ignore. Even as a kid, she had this natural grace, that presence. People would stop and stare when she sang at school talent shows. You could already tell she was different. Her family didn't have much, but they had love, and they had faith. Sundays meant church, and church meant music. That's where Zola learned how to pour her soul into a song. Those old gospel hymns taught her more than any singing coach ever could, how to connect, how to feel every word. Her voice wasn't the loudest in the room, but it carried emotion that could hush a crowd. That kind of gift, man. It doesn't just appear, it's born from struggle, from real life. Growing up in the late 1940 environment, the entertainment world was shifting. The radio started bringing new sounds, jump blues, doo-wop, early rock and roll. Artists like Ruth Brown, Dinah Washington, and Big Mama Thornton were opening doors, showing that women could stand tall in a man's game. Zola was watching, learning, dreaming. She'd sneak out to local clubs, standing by the back door just to hear the live bands play. Imagine her, a teenage girl in a hand-me-down dress, watching legends perform, whispering to herself, "One day, that's gonna be me." And she meant it. By her late teens, Zola had started performing around town. She wasn't a big name yet, but her charm was undeniable. She had that it factor, part elegance, part attitude, and all heart. The crowd loved her because she felt real, no gimmicks, no act, just pure soul. Her friends used to say, Zola could sing the phone book and still make you cry, and they weren't lying. But being a woman chasing fame in that era wasn't a fairy tale. The industry was dominated by men producers, managers, singers, and most of them didn't take women seriously unless they were eye candy. Zola wasn't about that life. She wanted respect. She wanted to be known for her voice, not just her looks. Still, she knew how to use her beauty with class. She carried herself like a lady, confident, elegant, and graceful. People remembered her not just for how she sang, but how she walked into a room. Then came the moment that would change everything. One night, at a small club in downtown LA, she was performing with a local group when she caught the attention of a man named Buck Ram, a sharp manager and songwriter who was building a group called the Platters. They were still trying to find their sound, still missing something. When Buck heard Zola sing, he knew right away that was the missing piece. It wasn't common back then to have a woman in a male vocal group. People thought it wouldn't work. But Buck saw what others didn't. Zola brought balance. Her presence softened the group's tone, gave them style, and made them unforgettable. She didn't just sing background. She elevated the entire group's image. Joining the Platters wasn't just a career move, it was destiny. Zola stepped into rehearsals with confidence, but also a little fear. Imagine it being the only woman in a room full of men, trying to prove you belong. But from the first note, she earned their respect. Tony Williams, the group's lead singer, later said that Zola had a voice like velvet and a soul like gold. She wasn't trying to outshine anyone, she just added her magic. And suddenly, the sound of the Platters became something new, something timeless. By the early 1950s, the group started performing around California, perfecting their harmonies, their stage presence, their image. They weren't stars yet, but every night Zola was learning about music, about fame, and about survival in a world that didn't make space for women like her. And deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. The spotlight was calling her name, but she also sensed the price that came with it. In a business built on dreams and danger, Zola Taylor was about to walk a line that would change her life forever. When Zola officially joined the Platters, man, the chemistry was instant. It wasn't just about the harmonies, it was about the vibe. Tony Williams had that silky smooth lead, David Lynch and Paul Roby brought depth, Herb Reed held it all together, and Zola, she added soul, class, and that little spark the group didn't even know they needed. From the moment they hit the stage together, you could tell this was something special. They weren't just another doo-wop group, they were elegance personified. Those early rehearsals were no joke, though. Buck Ram was a perfectionist. He made them rehearse for hours, tightening every note, every move. If you want to last, he'd say, you gotta sound like you're singing for the heavens. And man, the Platters did just that. They practiced in cheap studios, sometimes even in borrowed apartments, just chasing that perfect harmony. Zola loved it, the grind, the energy, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, they were onto something big. Their first real breakthrough came when they signed with Federal Records. It wasn't a huge label, but it was a start. Those early tracks didn't hit the charts, but they showed the promise, that smooth, romantic style that would later define them. The magic truly happened when Buck Ram got them a deal with Mercury Records. That's when things started to take off. Zola was now performing across the country, wearing elegant gowns, moving with grace. Everywhere they went, people couldn't stop talking about the girl in the Platters. She wasn't just standing in the back singing harmonies, she was part of the show, man. When the spotlight hit her, she owned it. Her smile lit up the stage, her voice blended perfectly with the guys, and audiences fell in love. Off stage, Zola kept things professional, but she wasn't blind to the challenges. Some promoters and radio hosts didn't like the idea of a mixed-gender group. They'd make comments, question her place. But Zola didn't flinch. She carried herself like she belonged because she did. "I earned my spot," she once said, "and nobody's taking that from me." The group's schedule was wild, constant touring, late-night drives, barely any rest. But Zola never complained. She loved every second. For her, this wasn't just fame, it was validation. She had made it from the church pews of Los Angeles to national stages, and the best was yet to come. The Platters were about to drop songs that would change music history forever, the kind of records people still play decades later. Zola didn't know it yet, but her voice and presence were about to be etched into the golden age of R&B. By the mid-1950s, the Platters were unstoppable, man. They had found their groove, and the world was finally catching on. When Only You hit the airwaves, everything changed. That smooth harmony, that clean sound, it was like nothing anyone had heard before. And right there, adding that soft touch, that feminine glow to the group's sound, was Zola Taylor. She wasn't the lead, but you could feel her in every note. Her tone balanced the men perfectly, she made the music breathe. Then came The Great Pretender. Boom, a monster hit. That song turned the Platters into global stars. They weren't just performing in little clubs anymore. They were playing big theaters, appearing on TV, traveling the world. And every time Zola walked on stage in her shimmering gown, man, people noticed. She was classy, elegant, confident, the image of 1,950 glamour. She represented black excellence in an industry that didn't always want to see it. Audiences loved how polished the Platters looked. The men in tuxedos, Zola in her long gowns, they carried themselves like royalty. While most doo-wop groups went for street charm, the Platters went for sophistication. They gave young black America something to be proud of. And that was no small thing. Behind the scenes, though, it was work, work, and more work. Constant touring, endless rehearsals, long nights in the studio. The industry wasn't gentle, and being the only woman in the crew came with its own pressures. Zola had to navigate egos, gossip, and all the assumptions people made about her. but she handled it like a pro. Never messy, never loud, just focus and grace. Her friendship with Tony Williams grew stronger during this time. They had mutual respect, built from long hours on the road. Some said there was a spark there, but whether it was romance or just deep admiration, only they knew. What's clear is that they made magic together on stage. When Tony's high tenor soared and Zola's harmonies wrapped around his voice, it was pure soul. By the late 1950s, the Platters were one of the biggest vocal groups in the world. Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, Twilight Time, My Prayer, timeless records. They crossed over to white audiences, breaking racial barriers, and Zola stood right there in the middle of it all, proving that talent has no boundaries. But fame, man, fame always comes with a price. And for Zola, that price was about to get real heavy. Because just as the world fell in love with the Platters' sound, her personal life was about to spin out of control, all because of one name, Frankie Lyman. By the late 1950s, the Platters had gone from a small Los Angeles group to one of the most successful vocal acts on the planet. Everywhere they went, fans screamed their names. Their records were selling millions, and radio DJs couldn't stop spinning their songs. Only You, The Great Pretender, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, those tracks became the soundtrack of the decade. The Platters weren't just famous, they were everywhere. And right in the middle of that fame was Zola Taylor, the elegant, confident woman who turned heads wherever she went. She wasn't the loudest voice in the group, but she was its heart. She gave the Platters their polish, their poise, their soul. When she stepped on stage in her sparkling gowns and that perfect smile, man, it was over. The audience melted. People would whisper, "Who's that woman?" TV shows wanted them. Hollywood parties invited them. And suddenly, the Platters were rubbing shoulders with movie stars and politicians. For a black group in the 1950s, that was unheard of. They broke barriers with style. And Zola? She loved it. She carried herself like a queen because she earned it. But fame has a funny way of introducing you to people you never expected to meet. Around this time, Zola crossed paths with a young man who was just as talented and just as troubled. His name was Frankie Lyman. He was the teenage sensation behind Why Do Fools Fall in Love? The kid who could make a crowd go wild with just one grin. He was charming, unpredictable, and reckless. Zola was older, wiser, already a star in her own right. But somehow this wild boy caught her attention. At first, it seemed harmless. Two artists, two worlds colliding. They'd run into each other at shows, award ceremonies, and studio sessions. Frankie was fascinated by her, the class, the maturity, the calm confidence. And Zola? She saw something in him too, maybe a bit of herself from years before, hungry for success, craving love in a cutthroat business. Their connection grew fast. They laughed, shared stories about the industry, about the pressure of fame. Frankie was still a teenager, but fame had aged him. He'd already seen too much, too soon, drugs, manipulation, fake friends. Zola thought she could be a grounding force in his life. She believed in him, man. That's the kind of person she was: loyal, nurturing, hopeful. But the media didn't see it that way. When word got out that the classy Zola Taylor from the Platters was seeing Frankie Lyman, people went crazy. Headlines called it the oddest couple in show business. Some loved it, others called her a fool. But Zola didn't care. For once, she was following her heart, not the stage lights. Still, something deep down told her this love story wouldn't end like the songs they sang. The spotlight that once lifted her up was about to turn harsh because with Frankie, things were about to get wild. At first, Zola thought Frankie was just misunderstood, a young star who needed someone steady in his corner. But man, fame had already done its damage. Frankie Lyman was only in his late teens, but he'd lived a lifetime. Money, women, fast living, he was caught up in it all. When Zola got close to him, she saw both sides, the sweet, funny kid who made her laugh and the troubled artist who couldn't escape his demons. Their relationship started like a movie, glamorous and exciting. They'd hit the town together, show up at Hollywood parties, smiling for the cameras. But behind those smiles was chaos. Frankie's addiction to heroin was spiraling. and it pulled Zola into a storm she couldn't control. She'd try to help him stay up all night, talking, praying, hoping he'd get clean. But the industry didn't care. They loved the drama, not the people. Soon, Zola's reputation started taking hits. Reporters painted her as the older woman corrupting a young star. Others called her naive, saying she should have known better. But what they didn't see was her heart. Zola genuinely loved that man. She believed love could heal him. But love, man, sometimes it just ain't enough. The stress of it all began to show. Her focus shifted from her career to Frankie's survival. She missed rehearsals, turned down shows, and started pulling away from the Platters. The group was moving fast, new tours, new records, and Zola couldn't keep up. People around her started whispering, "She's losing herself." And they were right. The relationship with Frankie became more complicated when talk of marriage started. Some say they secretly tied the knot. Others say it never happened. What's certain is that when Frankie died in 1968 from a drug overdose, Zola claimed she was his wife, one of 3 women who did. The scandal was everywhere. Lawsuits, confusion, heartbreak. The same media that once adored her now treated her like gossip fodder. That whole ordeal broke her spirit. Imagine giving your best years to music, to love, and ending up judged by the world that once cheered for you. Zola went from the spotlight to the shadows almost overnight. She didn't have the powerful managers or big contracts to protect her, just memories, regrets, and a voice that still had magic, even if the world stopped listening. People close to her said she never truly got over Frankie. His death haunted her, not just because of love, but because she felt she failed him. "I tried," she once said, "but you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved." And that right there, that quiet pain became part of her legacy. The woman who sang her heart out with the Platters, who carried herself with grace and elegance, became another story of how fame can lift you up and break you all at once. After the whirlwind with Frankie Lyman, Zola tried to find her footing again. But the music business doesn't wait for anyone, man. One day you're on top of the charts. The next day you're just another name people used to know. The Platters had started to drift apart, egos, lawsuits, and management drama tearing them from the inside out. Buck Ram, the mastermind behind the group, was fighting to keep the brand alive, but too many versions of the Platters started popping up. Everyone wanted a piece of the name, and in that chaos, Zola got pushed aside. It was wild. The same industry that had once praised her elegance now acted like she'd never existed. Promoters started booking fake Platters groups, some without a single original member. Zola tried to stand her ground, reminding people that she was part of the real legacy. But legal battles drained her energy and money. It wasn't about fame anymore. It was about survival. She tried going solo for a while, performing small shows and community events around California. Her voice still had that glow, soft, soulful, full of life, but the crowds were smaller, and the pay barely covered her bills. Imagine that, one of the pioneers of R&B harmony, reduced to performing for tips in local clubs. That kind of fall messes with your spirit. The emotional toll of the Frankie scandal followed her everywhere. People would whisper behind her back, "Isn't that the woman from that story?" It was cruel. Zola had always been private, dignified, but the world only wanted the gossip. And when she tried to set the record straight, nobody wanted to listen. The media moves on, fast pain doesn't. By the early 1970s, things got worse financially. Without royalties, without management, she had to rely on small gigs, interviews, and occasional nostalgia shows. Sometimes, she'd join other doo-wop revivals, performing the same songs that made her famous 20 years earlier. The crowd would cheer, older fans remembering, younger ones just discovering her. And in those moments, she came alive again, a flicker of who she once was. But once the lights dimmed, she'd go home to quiet. She also battled health issues. Years of stress, exhaustion, and emotional pain had worn her down. Friends said she tried to stay positive, always talking about the old days with the Platters, how proud she was to be part of something that meant so much to people. But deep down, you could tell she felt forgotten. And yet, man, there was still pride. Even when she didn't have the fame or the money, she had her dignity. She'd tell people, "I sang with the Platters, we changed music." And she wasn't wrong. Her presence had opened doors for countless women in soul and R&B who came after her. She might have been struggling, but she never stopped believing she was part of something legendary. Still, the world didn't make it easy. The lawsuits, the rumors, the loneliness, it all built up. Zola had survived the spotlight, but now she was surviving the silence. And in that silence, her greatest fight was yet to come, the battle for her name, her truth, and her place in history. By the mid-1980s, Zola Taylor's name came roaring back into headlines, but not because of a comeback album or tribute tour. Nah, man, it was because of a lawsuit. The same love story that had once made her heart race was now dragging her through courtrooms and tabloids. When Frankie Lyman's estate became a legal battlefield, Zola was one of 3 women who claimed to be his wife. It was messy-like, movie-level messy, and that's exactly what it became years later. The lawsuit over Frankie's royalties was brutal. Each woman, Zola, Elizabeth Waters, and Amira Eagle, stepped forward saying she was the real Mrs. Lyman. The record companies didn't want to pay out, the lawyers circled like sharks, and the public just wanted the drama. Zola wasn't chasing fame, she just wanted fairness. Frankie had died young, his money gone, and the people who'd loved him were left with confusion and pain. But in the eyes of the court, it became entertainment. For Zola, reliving it all, the love, the chaos, the heartbreak was like reopening a wound that never healed. Reporters would shove microphones in her face, asking about Frankie's drug use, their supposed marriage, her role in his downfall. It hurt, man. The same woman who helped bring sophistication to black music was now reduced to a tabloid headline. The lawsuit dragged on for years before finally getting tossed into legal limbo. No real winner, just exhaustion. When the film Why Do Fools Fall in Love came out in 1998, it all came rushing back. Halle Berry played Zola Taylor, and though the movie made her look glamorous, it also reopened old wounds. People started debating again. Was Zola really married to him? Was she part of his downfall? The younger generation saw her as a character, not a real woman who had lived through all that pain. Some friends said she was proud to see her story told. Others said she felt misrepresented. Maybe it was both. After the movie, Zola lived quietly in California. No entourage, no flash. Just her memories, some family, and a handful of close friends who never forgot the real, her kind, classy, and funny as hell when she wanted to be. They said she still hummed those old Platters tunes around the house, smiling softly when the memories came. Those were good days, she'd say, real good days. But her health kept declining. The years of struggle had taken their toll emotionally, physically, spiritually. She wasn't bitter, though. She accepted her life for what it was, a mix of beauty and pain. In April 2007, Zola Taylor passed away quietly at age 69. There were no flashing lights, no front-page headlines, just a few heartfelt obituaries from people who remembered her voice, her grace, and her contribution to music. And that's the saddest part, man. A woman who helped shape the sound of an era, who broke barriers and inspired countless singers, left this world with barely a whisper. But those who truly knew her story, or heard that soft harmony behind the Platters' hits, they remember. They know Zola wasn't just a background singer, she was a cornerstone of that timeless sound. Zola Taylor might have left this world quietly, but her influence still echoes through every harmony sung by a girl group that came after her. Before the Supremes, before En Vogue, before Destiny's Child, there was Zola, standing tall among the fellas, showing the world that a woman could bring both beauty and power to a male group. She didn't just sing, she represented an era when grace meant strength. In the 1950s, the music industry didn't make space for women like her, but Zola carved her own lane. She showed that femininity wasn't weakness, it was an advantage. Her soft touch balanced the raw soul of the Platters, turning them into something more refined, more emotional, more universal. Without Zola's presence, the Platters might have just been another talented group lost in history. With her, they became timeless. You can still hear her influence in every polished R&B act that followed. The way groups like the Supremes used coordinated gowns, the way En Vogue owned their stage presence, that all goes back to what Zola helped pioneer. Even modern artists who never knew her name have benefited from the doors she pushed open. She proved that elegance had a place in soul music, and that black women could be icons of style and sophistication on the world stage. Her vocals, though often subtle, gave those Platters songs a warmth that made people feel something. Listen to The Great Pretender again, that softness floating under Tony Williams' voice. That's Zola. That's her magic. It's the kind of contribution people overlook because it's not loud, not flashy, but it's there, and it matters. She was the quiet power behind the spotlight. Beyond the music, Zola's life became a story of resilience. She faced the worst of the industry, sexism, racism, exploitation, and still carried herself with dignity. She didn't let bitterness define her. Even after all the lawsuits, heartbreaks, and betrayals, people who met her said she was kind, graceful, and humble. "I did what I loved," she once told a friend. "That's all that matters." In many ways, Zola's story is a mirror for countless artists who never got their due. She was the definition of underrated. Not because she lacked talent, but because the world wasn't ready to fully honor a woman like her. Yet, decades later, her influence still shines. The elegance of the Platters, the legacy of crossover soul, the image of class in black entertainment, Zola Taylor helped build that. So when you hear those opening notes of "Only You," or when a new artist steps on stage channeling that mix of style and soul, remember that's Zola's spirit living on. When the film Why Do Fools Fall in Love dropped in 1998, a whole new generation finally heard Zola Taylor's name again. Halle Berry played her with that same mixture of charm, pride, and heartbreak. And for a moment, Zola's story was back in the public eye. Some people saw the movie and thought it was pure drama, but those who knew the real woman behind the character knew it went much deeper. That film didn't just tell a messy love triangle. It reminded the world that Zola was a real person, a trailblazer who helped shape R&B history. After the movie, fans started digging into the Platters catalog again. Old vinyls sold out, "Only You" and "The Great Pretender" got spins on classic radio. And suddenly people were asking, who was that woman in the group? Internet forums, early fan pages, and later YouTube comments became filled with love for Zola. People shared stories about meeting her, seeing her perform, or just how her music reminded them of their parents dancing in the living room. It was like her legacy had quietly reignited decades later. She was finally getting her flowers. And man, YouTube changed everything. When fans started uploading old footage of the Platters, younger generations saw Zola in her prime, radiant, poised, and commanding every bit of attention without saying a word. In the comment sections, you'll find people calling her classy, timeless, the real deal. That's the beautiful part of the internet. It gives legends like her a second life. Even now, artists and historians talk about how she helped redefine what it meant to be a woman in entertainment. Before Zola, it was rare for a woman to stand next to male stars as an equal. She didn't fade into the background. She elevated the group's entire image. That's why modern R&B owes her a quiet debt, because she made it normal for women to share that spotlight. Music historians now list Zola among the early female pioneers who changed the face of pop and R&B. Some retrospectives have started calling her the First Lady of the Platters, giving her the credit she always deserved. That title fits, man. She was regal without even trying to be. Today, her story lives on not just in documentaries and biopics, but in the hearts of fans who refuse to let her be forgotten. Every few years, tributes pop up online. Rest in peace, Zola. The Platters wouldn't be the Platters without her. And they're right. Zola Taylor might have been underrated in her lifetime, but the world's catching up now. Her elegance, her resilience, her voice, they're all part of the foundation that built R&B. She didn't chase the fame, she chased the art. And in the end, that's what lasts. She had the voice of an angel. Man, that's how people always described her. And now, looking back, it feels almost poetic. Zola Taylor's life was a mix of beauty and pain, just like the songs she helped bring to life. From a little girl singing in church to standing center stage with one of the greatest groups of all time, she lived a story most could only dream about. But fame, as she learned, isn't always a blessing. It shines bright, then it burns. When you think about it, her journey was bigger than music. Zola represented strength wrapped in grace. She broke barriers without waving a flag about it. She didn't demand the spotlight, she earned it. And even when the world turned its back, she never stopped carrying herself with that same quiet dignity. She showed that being a woman in a man's world didn't mean shrinking, it meant shining differently. Sometimes, I wonder if she knew how much she meant to people. If she ever realized how many young singers looked at her and saw possibility. Because that's the thing about legends, they don't always get to see the impact they've made. But it's there, in every harmony, every soulful note that carries a bit of her energy. Her life was far from perfect. It had highs that touched the stars and lows that nearly broke her. Yet through it all, Zola stayed real. She never faked who she was to fit the industry mold. She was authentic before authenticity became cool. And that's why, decades later, people still talk about her with respect, not pity. Zola Taylor's story reminds us that being underrated doesn't mean forgotten. It means the world didn't clap loud enough, but time will. And time has. Fame fades, man but soul like hers, that never dies. Zola Taylor may not have left behind mansions or millions, but what she did leave was something far more powerful, a legacy. Every time Only You or The Great Pretender plays, she's right there in those notes, that soft harmony, that gentle grace that made the Platters more than just a group. She made them a symbol of class, of timeless beauty, of unity through music. When you look at the pictures from back then, the gowns, the tuxedos, the way she carried herself, you see someone who believed in what she represented. She wasn't chasing fame. She was protecting art. She gave her voice to something bigger than herself. And that's what legends do. It's wild to think how someone so important could be so overlooked for so long, but that's the cruel part of history. It forgets the quiet ones first. Yet, here we are, decades later, still saying her name, still telling her story, still giving her the flowers she never got while she was here, because Zola earned them, every single one. She lived through heartbreak, loss, and injustice, but she never lost her light. Even when the spotlight moved on, her glow didn't fade. It just became something deeper, something spiritual. And maybe that's the lesson her story leaves us with. Greatness doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's found in how you carry yourself when no one's watching. So here's to Zola Taylor, the First Lady of the Platters, the woman who sang with soul, loved with heart, and lived with grace. Her story isn't just about what she lost, it's about what she gave. The world might have forgotten for a while, but the music didn't. The music never forgets. This is Celebrity Underrated, giving flowers to those who never got theirs.